So here's an interesting story about meditation. When I was 28, I'd just come off the back of 10 years of alcoholic drinking, and I'd got sober, and I was trying to sort of get to the root of all the suffering that had been driving the drinking. I heard about meditation, and it has its promise of, meditate and that'll end your suffering. So I started reading loads of books and throwing myself into that, trying to do it at home, and eventually going on loads of different meditation retreats. And the experience I had was that it was really difficult and very painful in many ways. I would force myself to sit for 20 minutes, then 30 minutes, then 40 minutes at home. And it was so mind-numbingly boring, and it felt very cold and dry and numb. And then I decided to push it further because I was very determined, for better or for worse, probably for worse at this point, as we'll get to. And I signed up for some 10-day Vipassana retreats. This is where you go and you do 10 hours a day for 10 days in silence. This was a few months into my meditation journey. And so I went off to do that. And again, it was so painful and boring that it put me off meditation for about 7 or 8 months afterwards. I couldn't bear to meditate again. I remember having the experience, it's not only physically uncomfortable, because you have to sit there, and I wasn't very flexible. But it's just, what I look back on and see now is that because I'd been coming out of this period of alcoholism, I was so disconnected from my body, and my body was quite numb. And when I was meditating and just focusing on my breath or just trying to be present, I was sitting with that numbness and that sense of disconnection, that dissociation, which was my body's way of protecting myself. Growing up, I'd had various difficult emotional experiences. I'd learned to go into my head and be super intellectual, disconnect from the body. And that was really painful. So I started drinking, and all the anxiety felt better. I've got videos on the alcohol thing. You can go and check them out for more on that. But the disconnect from the body was a safety strategy, a protection strategy from the pain I was carrying in my body. So there's the pain deep down, and then there's these layers of disconnection, which are themselves painful. And that's why, to cope with that, I would drink and go into my head. And you might do different things. Everyone has some kinds of compulsions that they use to sort of medicate themselves to help themselves feel better. And in meditation, it's like you suddenly start to confront that really full on. If you sit there do a Vipassana retreat, I was sitting there with my numbness, with my disconnection for 10 hours a day, for 10 days straight. And I was so miserable by the end. Someone came up to me at the end of the first one and said, "Are you okay, man? You look so miserable for that entire thing." I'd be walking around during the breaks or at lunch, just feeling and looking incredibly depressed. And this is a case of when, I felt worse after meditation. And that was because my body wasn't ready. It didn't feel safe for me to be present in my body. And when I'm being with that unsafety and all the disconnection strategies that my body and mind use to protect me from that, it just bedded them in deeper. So it almost bedded in those, that numbness and disconnect even deeper. And this can happen with many people. I've got quite a few clients recently, which is what inspired this video, who are struggling with their meditation. They've tried really hard. They've gone to loads of retreats, but it's just not happening for them. They're not really making progress. They're not feeling things open up in the way that they want to. And the reason is that the body, the nervous system isn't ready to open up. It doesn't feel safe to open up. And just sitting there and just passively staying present with the body when it feels unsafe and frozen and numb and disconnected just beds that in more deeply. I had one client the other day. He had a really frustrating meditation session. He just felt so much more, in his head, the thoughts, and just pissed off after his meditation session. I suggested to him that what this is dissociation. And it made him feel better because he realized he wasn't doing anything wrong, and neither are you. It's just that for some people at certain times, meditation isn't quite the right approach. The reason is that it's too passive. You just sit there with your trauma, with your pain, with your frozenness, with your disconnection, with your protective strategies, with your protective patterns. You're just sitting there with it and doing nothing. Whereas what these parts need is they need a lot more attention, a lot more proactivity. You need to proactively really meet them, hear them, understand them, bring safety to them, hold them in love and attention knowingly, right? And that might be at little chunks at first, you know. Maybe you just spend a few seconds in the body first, then maybe a few minutes. And you get used to being in the body in a way that feels safe. I've got a video about that, you know, how to build safety in the body. I think it's called something like that you can go check out. I've got exercises. There are lots of things you can do. Just feeling your hands on your heart and your belly, for example, could be a way in. Maybe you can notice the warmth of that. And that's a slightly softer way in. Or you can imagine being in a safe place. And that, a little bit of relaxation in the chest, in the shoulders. This is so different to just sitting down in meditation. You know, at the end of a long day, you're a bit stressed and a bit disconnected, a bit numb. And then you just reinforce and bed that numbness in even more. So this is often a major reason why people struggle in meditation. So to complete my story, it was interesting what happened because somewhat weirdly, I did a second Vipassana retreat eventually. And it was just as miserable until the last day where for some reason I was scanning up and down my body very quickly, which is the practice you're doing at the end of this Vipassana retreat, which Vipassana involves a lot of 3 days of concentrating on your breath. And then there's 7 days of various forms of body scanning. And something cracked open. And there was just these orgasmic feelings, like fireworks coming up from below. So something opened up. And I felt very peaceful and warm and happy. And this lasted for a few days before it started closing down again. And I think that happened just by pure brute force, which is not a way I would recommend. That opening happening. And it didn't really last too long. Like I said, it closed down before. But it was something interesting. It showed me what that kind of, a different way was possible. That openness was possible. Then at a later date, I started getting into somatic work. And that just completely changed my trajectory. I stopped meditating because when I got into the somatic work, I was able to get in touch with my body in a way that felt safer, felt more held, because I was being guided by someone. And I was really paying attention to the parts. I wasn't just passively focusing on my breath or mindlessly body scanning. Because in Vipassana, the limit with the body scanning is you're just meant to, basically you just notice what's there, but you don't pay any attention to it. If it needs something from you, if there's a part of you, a frozen, numb part that needs to be held and seen and heard, Vipassana doesn't do that. No, most kinds of meditations, they're quite robotic. You just robotically repeat a pattern. And that's not what your body needs. It needs very specific attention. And when I started doing this work, I started letting my emotions, I was able to allow emotions to the surface. I started crying, some of the hurt that I was experiencing. Eventually, some of the anger started coming through. And the body is tensing, disconnecting, bracing against those experiences. So when you can actually let them to the surface, the body starts to relax and open up. And I did this for years. I got really into it. Hence why I have this channel now. Got obsessed with just feeling all the different feelings. And I could feel layers of heaviness and tension fall away. Like every time there was a big release, something within me would relax. It was just like with the beer. I'd drink a beer, something would relax. And this time it was happening just through actually releasing the pain at the root. And then when I would start to meditate again, it was becoming a completely different experience because now my body was softer and more open. My mind was quieter. And I could start to perceive what all the meditation teachers were talking about. The pure being, the pure awareness, the openness, the silence, the stillness, the joy of all that. It starts to become obvious. I'd never even needed meditation once the body opens up, it's just self-evident. Then meditation becomes much more joyful. It's much more soft. I'm not sitting with the pain anymore. I'm sitting with the openness, with the beingness. Right? It's a completely different experience. It's like, this is what they were talking about. And then you can start to do the meditation techniques, and then they start having much more of an impact because your whole system isn't just closed against that, right? The system has to feel safe enough to open up before those techniques start to work. unless you do it how I did it, whereas you just brute force your way through misery and depression. But I would not recommend that. And there's no guarantee it will work. It shouldn't have worked. I don't know why it did. So again, what do you start to do here? If you're meditating a lot and you're finding that you feel worse or that it's really hard, I would really recommend looking into practices first that are more tailored to your situation. So practices that you can start to notice. Notice the basic sense. Do I feel numb? What's actually going on in meditation? Do you feel numb? Does it feel like you're sitting with an experience of just cardboard, really blank? Or nothingnessy? Does it feel disconnected? Is it lacking? Is it monochrome? Is it dry? These are all typical signs that you're not really in touch with the juice of your body and your experience. And so there's a bit of work that needs to be done first, connecting to the body, helping it feel safe enough to open up and starting to process some of the emotions that lie at the root. Then things will open up. So with the one client I mentioned, what I did was, we actually, when he was in a session, he started to feel a bit disconnected. And that's what first put me on to, this is a pattern of his. And we just cycled through the senses, something as simple as that. Just looking, just watching. We first just look at something. I've got a painting here. I'm looking at the painting. Because it takes us away from the body while still being present. This is why orienting to your environment is a great practice. Looking at it like you're looking at a painting and just really taking in the colors and the light and the shadow. Then you turn to the other sense, to listening to sounds. You're hearing the sound of my voice. You're hearing birds outside, traffic, just the hum of life. Then you could turn to taste. Then you can turn to touch. You're slowly going from the outside in more towards your experience, and you start to feel much more present. So if you're starting to feel a bit disconnected in meditation, you can do that. That's a great little practice of just cycling through the senses. It tends to make you feel more present. You can bring in physical touch. Again, you're feeling numb. Just bring some support to that numbness with your hands. Notice that. Bring a bit of warmth. Bring a bit of care. You can talk to that part of you. Let it know, hey, I see you. I know you feel numb. I'm sure there's a very good reason you do. Ask it if there's anything it wants to share with you, anything it needs, this kind of thing. Just treat these parts of you like little children that you're getting to know and trying to help. Then ultimately, you want to notice your patterns of protection, help them to soften so that some of the emotions underneath can come up to the surface. Once you start really processing through your emotions, that's when the nervous system and the body starts opening up. Then the meditation is going to be helpful. It can be really helpful for integration if you do. Often I have a big emotional release and I'll meditate afterwards because it really beds in that shift, that change. But I don't really use meditation as my primary strategy anymore or approach to healing, to spirituality, to well-being, whatever it is, whatever you're using it for. I do all the emotional work, and then the meditation is just almost like a little support for that, to help integration, or just to enjoy myself, just to enjoy the silence and the stillness that is left afterwards. So remember that it's safety before stillness is kind of what I'm wanting to communicate here. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, you'd be surprised at the profound difference it makes to your life and to your meditation practice. So if you do want some support with this, you can check out my other videos, or I do work with people one-on-one. You can check out my website below. Rock and roll. Good luck. I'll see you later.